Hi everyone, and as I was talking about a little while ago, here we are in November with Brexit crunch time, and it's all gone a bit wobbly today. In fact, very wobbly. So, Theresa May, of course, is now under mounting pressure because the cabinet, there's various members of the cabinet resigning. Dominic Raab, the Brexit secretary, is resigning, saying that Theresa May's deal won't work and it's actually better to have, he's still chanting the mantra, it's better to have no deal. Bear in mind, Theresa May's deal only arose in the first place because the original Brexit secretary, David Davis, sat on his hands for, over a year, did nothing, achieved nothing. There was no deal emerging. He was never able to report the startings of a deal. And that was when it was entirely in his court. The argument that the so-called Brexiters are using at the moment is, oh, well, if we'd have stuck to our guns, if we'd have done this and done this, we'd have had a fantastic deal by now. Completely ignoring, of course, because their audience are people who don't pay attention, ignoring the fact that they got to do it their way. For the longest time, they got to do it their way. David Davis, Theresa May didn't do anything. She wasn't interfering at all. She went over to the summits and stuff like that. It was entirely in his court. And then nothing was happening. Theresa May said, right, we're sorting this out. Not that what she's sorted out is going to be in any way acceptable, because this is the problem at the moment. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, another one of the Brexit. You do notice with these Brexiteers, all of them are just basically after lining their own pockets. He is someone who basically wants, he wants Britain to be poorer so he can be richer, effectively. And because the economy is really unstable at the moment, that's why he's shifted his money over to Dublin, and he's persuading other people that are close to him to do the same thing. It's all about money for him. And he has now, well, he's supposed to be working on a letter, I don't know whether it's been submitted, calling for a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Now, I don't know whether anything would come of that. Obviously, the markets have been rocked today. Partly, I suppose, fear of the fact that Labour would jump at the chance to do this because they'd love to trigger a new general election. Now, we have to bear in mind that the current ruling party, the Conservatives, do not have a majority in Parliament. So ousting a leader as Prime Minister, it's not like when you've got a nice majority, you can just elect a new leader and get on with it. Doesn't necessarily work like that. The Prime Minister has to have the confidence of the House. And the DUP may well consider that their deal with Theresa May, even though they're not necessarily planning on voting for her deal either, but their deal, such as it is, not that they had a deal to support her with the Brexit deal, is with Theresa May. They may decide that actually not with someone else, they don't have a deal with them, and they no longer have a majority. It all gets very messy. Jeremy Corbyn would love to go for another general election. The markets fear, of course, a Jeremy Corbyn government because he is, he's not planning on letting big businesses get away without paying any taxes. And he's also not interested in services being in the hands of private companies who basically just siphon off a load of money and provide a crap service, Much along my lines, I would much prefer public services were nationalised, of course. So, obviously that's hit there. And just the uncertainty of it. Even if the Conservatives did just choose a new leader, or if the vote of no confidence failed and she still remained Prime Minister, there is still the issue that the Brexit deal is not going to go through, but it's been made perfectly clear there is no other deal. There is no other deal. Quite frankly, even this deal is not, it's little more than breadcrumbs. We had the best deal you could possibly have. We technically still have it for a few more months, which is the one we have right now. It was an amazing deal. It's absolutely baffling. And yet from the Brexit, the thing that annoys me most of all about this is you can see the ploy of the Brexiteers. They know that this is shit for the country. They absolutely know it. The reason they're doing it, it's not because they're stupid. It's literally because they just want to get rich. And what they do is do exactly what David Davis does. Do nothing. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Carp about how everyone else is doing it wrong and it's their fault we're going to have a bad Brexit. Even though those same people have said that a no-deal Brexit would absolutely be fine. But now what they're doing, because they know we've got a realistic prospect, anything can now trigger a no-deal Brexit. Anything at all. Because the clock is ticking. Theresa May being ousted would trigger it, because whoever else took over is not going to go with that deal, because she will have been ousted because of that deal. If it doesn't get through Parliament, whether she's ousted or not, then there's no deal. I mean, I've talked in the past about the fact whatever deal we have would have to be ratified by every government in the EU. Every single one. Now, I get the impression that there is a deal in place, even though I don't necessarily know the details of it, that would be acceptable. But there's another important parliament that has to ratify it as well, and that's the UK Parliament. If we don't even ratify our own bloody deal, then there's no chance. It's sunk. And there's, the clock's ticking. Next March, that's it, next March. And it'll be done. And what annoys me about them is that they're sitting there doing nothing. They've not come up with any suggestions themselves. Their suggestions are simply, we should have played hardball. What does that mean exactly? They don't know. When they were in charge of the negotiations, did nothing. Nothing at all. Got them nothing, achieved nothing. And yet they're still going to look to the people who pay no attention. At the end of all this mess, they're going to say, well, of course it's a bad Brexit because we weren't the ones in charge. Even though they are the ones who said a no-deal Brexit is actually all right. We'll be fine with it. And if that actually happens, and if that happens, by the way, the sort of 10 things I talked about that would befall us are going to be undeniable. I mean, there's been plenty of people in the comments of that video going, no, you're absolutely not wrong. Even though I specifically own, and there was many other things I could have talked about as well. I specifically just talked about 10 things that even the Brexiteer camp admitted to. That was the thing. But if we do end up with a no deal, it will be completely undeniable, because every single one of those 10 things, one of two things will happen. Either they will come to pass, or there will have to be such major intervention to avoid them that it will be undeniable that it was a super serious danger. I mean, I was almost having some sympathy for Dominic Raab, who became the new Brexit secretary, because although he's a Brexiteer, he basically didn't have time to negotiate anything. By the time he came in, Theresa May's so-called checkers deal was already sort of there. He was basically tasked with implementing it. So you could always argue, he could maybe argue that if he'd have been there from the start, he could have negotiated something better. But then you've got to remember, this is the man who just last week went, I've just realised the border that we have with Calais is quite important for trade. We have quite a few time-sensitive goods coming through there. Would be a bit buggered if that didn't go smoothly after Brexit. He just said that last week. The Brexit secretary. So this is not a man who would have achieved anything no matter how much time he'd been given. Gordon Bennett. It boggles the mind. But what really, as I say, what really upsets me is what should any intelligent person, once this mess is done with, will see exactly what shitty situation we have been dumped in. The problem is that they're not preaching to that audience. Like Donald Trump, they are preaching to an audience that doesn't pay the slightest bit of attention to anything, doesn't think anything through. And I have sympathy, don't get me wrong, I have sympathy for those who may have voted for Brexit for political reasons. They didn't like the idea of having even more politicians monkeying about with things. But as if ours are any better on their own, blimey. At least they act as a counterweight. EU Parliament and the British Parliament. But an absolute disaster. And an awful lot of it, as I say, completely unworkable. I mean, Northern Ireland, there was a reason why they didn't talk about that in the lead up to the referendum. Because that's insoluble. There is no solution to that. And it's an absolute disaster. I mean, I'm looking at this situation now and thinking, I'm feeling for all the poor people that are going to be financially buggered. There's already, we know, for example, that as a result, you can look at where the shares are going down, where the markets are sort of losing confidence and pulling out of. They're pulling out of mortgage lenders because they don't believe that people are going to be buying houses. Builders, people actually build houses because they don't believe there's going to be keeping pace with house building either after this. And then what's going to happen is the cost of goods is going to increase. That's going to squeeze people's budgets. Those jams, as Theresa May calls them, just about managing, are suddenly going to find themselves in a jam because they're not going to be managing at all. And I hate that I've just made light of that, because it's an awful, awful situation. And that's for the people who will retain their jobs and are just going to be squeezed because things are going to cost more. What about the people who are going to lose their jobs? I mean, I even have sympathy for the people who voted Brexit on the basis of a lie or many lies. Like I said, that, you know, let's save all this money. Like they keep using this same thing. Let's have no deal and save all this money. It's like, where are we getting this money to save from? You know, I was going to ask, do they understand we get this money from trading? But they do understand that. They're just saying it because they're treating the rest of us like we've got no brains. They're only talking to the brainless parts of the population, you know, which is insulting. But at the moment, of course, it's still all posturing. At the moment, no crunch time has actually happened. Nothing's definitely happened. Theresa May's plan hasn't been voted down by Parliament yet, hasn't yet been gone to a vote. You know, so far there hasn't been an actual challenge to her leadership. The vote of no confidence, as far as I know, unless something happened very recently, hasn't as yet happened. You know, it may be that he's just bluffing. I don't know. Sounds like the sort of thing he would do, though, wouldn't it? I mean, he's set himself, Jacob Rees-Mogg, in abject opposition to her. You know, it makes no difference. He could easily draft it. I don't think he'd even be bothered about looking a fool if it didn't work. So, you know, so nothing has definitely happened yet, but it just looks now, and I, like a no deal might actually happen, and I really just had, in the back of my mind, I just thought to myself, maybe it's all just posturing and there's a bit of a deal been worked out privately, and they'll announce, at the point at which they have to announce something, they'll announce it, and they'll announce it in such a way that everyone can go back to their own electorate in every country in Europe, including Britain, and say, we've got the best deal we could, and that'll be that. Obviously, you can't announce it too far ahead, because then people would say, well, you had loads more negotiating time. Why didn't you negotiate for a better deal? So you're saying it right. It's the last minute. It's this or nothing. You know, we've done the best we can with it. I was really hoping that would be the case. It now looks increasingly unlikely to be the case. We have had... I mean, the problem as well with having lots of ministers resign and all the rest of it, it's already, in terms of the rest of the running of the country, that's already been disastrous enough. Because, of course, people have been put into positions, into ministries, to supposedly balance the cabinet between Brexiteers and Remainers. And so people haven't been chosen according to whether they're, you know, going to do a good job in that ministry or not. I'm not saying they ever really are. But there's certainly no pretense at it this time now. But when ministers keep quitting, then, well, that ministry does an important job. Yes, I know the civil service, but they can't decide policy. You know, there's supposed to be an MP at the helm. And it's just shitting on the rest of the country. Nothing else is really happening in the rest of the country because everyone is posturing in Parliament, playing their political games, because to them it's a game. You know, they're getting their MP salary. Okay, they're at high risk of losing it if the electorate of their constituency isn't happy with them. But if they are happy with them, then it is just a game. But then, you know, they go off with an index-linked pension and all the rest of it. And there's people already suffering, let's face facts. There's people already suffering. And there are people who are going to continue to suffer. And more people. And it's disgusting. But at the same time, we live in a democracy. We could stop it. But we're not doing. We're just handing over responsibility to the very people who are some of the least responsible people in the country. Well, it's sad, really. But anyway, there we go. I shall come back at some point with an update. I expected to do a video round about this time on something. I'm disappointed it's come to this. As a Remainer myself, I was certainly not hoping for a shit show. I was hoping against... It was be cutting off my nose to spite my face. I was hoping against hope there would be a decent deal and we could make the best out of the inevitable Brexit. But maybe we're not going to be able to do that. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks very much for listening, if you made it this far. Click the like button, please, if you enjoyed the video, and also subscribe for further content. Comment down below, and until next time, I'll see you later.